this is generally about my first year. I've just finished it. Whether there's any parallels, I don't know. But we'll see how this goes. As I said, I'm here to share my experience so far, in the belief it will give some insight into, or comparison into what it may be like for yourselves going down the same path as I have. It's not generally easy because one person's experience can differ from someone else's. But if there's anything that I feel is right to say up front, should you consider trying to go self-employed, is that it's as much of a personal and emotional journey as it is a business experience. They do go hand in hand, and they do interfere with each other all the time. For me, myself, I'd spent 18 months without work, except for a 2-week stint opening mail for a company in Lancing. This was following taking a voluntary redundancy from my previous job. I was working for Grosvenor Casinos in home before it closed. And the choice was I could apply elsewhere, or I could just take the redundancy. And the first thing in my mind was the debt that I already had hanging around my neck. So I figured I'll take the voluntary redundancy, I'll clear my debt, and hopefully find another job quick. But I wasn't anticipating how much the recession had taken over the job market in the south on its own. So that's when I started thinking about going it alone. And it was a half-forced decision and half not. I had to take into consideration that my son had been born a few months after I'd lost my job, and already had a daughter who was growing up fast. So for the sake of simply putting bread and food on the table, I had to take action for myself. And my business in design just wouldn't be born without it. So it's thanks to that.
Is this your work?
This is my work, yes.
Excellent.
I found a local project in Worthing, which at the time was specialising supporting people going it on their own. And they did plenty for me, especially as I was seeing someone on a regular basis who was engaging with my brain, helping me get ideas on paper, looking at every little bit of research that I needed to for working from home in particular, because there was no way I was going to afford to have a presence on the street. And it was near the end of that duration that I found out about a new scheme that the Job Centre had started down here called the New Enterprise Allowance, whereby if I had a decent plan and they thought I was worthy of that, they would put me on course. The only stipulations were that you had 8 weeks to put together a plan on paper under mentoring, and during that time they pay you your JSA. And then once your plan is ready for submission, you're then on a 26-week allowance, which is similar to what I had with JSA, just to keep things ticking over until my business was starting to make a little bit of money. And then from that, my business existed, and my focus was just to get it stable. And then it was when they told me who my mentor was that it was, I think I jumped for the clouds, because they'd given me the Prince's Trust. I didn't know they were an affiliate of the Job Centre at the time. I didn't know they were the selected mentor. I couldn't believe my luck, because I knew the reputation they had. So things move on, and within a couple of weeks of being accepted for the NEA, I'm sitting in this office in Hove opposite my new mentor, Michael. And it was his job to make sure that everything was in line, every specific detail of their business plan model was met, because if it wasn't complete and I went to submit it, I'd be turned down. So it was pretty intense for the 8 weeks, but I already had a lot of research behind me from the previous mentoring I was getting in Worthing to really help move things along a little bit. And if there was any highlight to the process, it was the constant debate over money. Now, I hadn't been in business before, and my concern was I didn't want to, if I'm going to apply for a loan, I don't want to take too much. He was of the opinion that I needed to make sure I had everything I needed to get started, otherwise I would struggle if I needed something later on. So throughout the whole argument, it's like a wage of war between me, the bean counter, and Michael, the shopaholic. He was thinking more about spending my money than I was about spending my money. So I went with the suggestion, and yes, to many degrees he was right. But it was him making me think, him having the confidence in me that let me feel I had the confidence in myself to take those steps on my own. You need someone to bounce off, someone to believe in you, to give you that little bit of hope. If I didn't have a good idea, he was going to tell me. Yet he seemed to like everything I said. And it was just a case of have an idea, rein it in, write it down, resample it, and then take it back out there again and put it in your plan. So my plan was ready by December of 2011, but given the time of year it was, I had to wait until the end of January for my plan to be reviewed. And it was that date in January which was the last time I saw Michael. We met that morning, went into the hired office that they had to meet, well, to pretty much go to what I refer to as the Dragon's Den, and there were 3 of them. I think I've never been so scared in my life, because there I am asking for all this money, wondering if they're going to give it to me. And there's Michael quietly sitting, believing in my plan as it was. But thank you to those rather handsome, charming, very nice dragons, I did get my grant. So, and the other great bit about it was that Michael was there not only to see the work that I put in, but to see that bit of success come out of it. I hadn't had any for a while, so it was like a breath of fresh air. But immediately after meeting Mike, I then have to meet a new mentor called Alison. Her role is to be my business mentor for the next 2 years. So on a certain frequency of time, which I can designate, whether it's once a week, once a fortnight, once a month, I can go see her and bring up all the issues that I have in my business at that present moment in time, and she'll help me work through those solutions. But I've gone from that meeting to then being on the train home, and that's when that kind of dream became a reality. Because with every phone call I made home, and to other family and friends telling them I've got this loan, I'm now self-employed, I'm an entrepreneur, the more expletives were running through my head thinking, what the hell have I done? Am I really going to do this? So it was quite literally crunch time by then. Everything that I focused on with my children and what I wanted to do for them in the future was now in my hands to make real.
Scary.
So following this, I turned 30 in February last year, and to celebrate, I watched my loan arrive in my business account. Now, that was a shock, because in my history up until the age of 25, the most I've ever spent on myself was £200 on a surround sound system. And now I'm staring at this rather extraordinary amount, thinking tomorrow I have to buy the Adobe suite, that's expensive enough, a high quality printer so I can produce samples for clients, a tablet device so I can take my work with me. Suffice to say that the morning I spent ordering one item after another, knowing I had the money in the bank already, within the space of an hour, gone, left me rather nauseous. That's an experience that has not left me, and I can't say that I felt brilliant for the rest of the day. I didn't. I was just absolutely nauseous at how much I'd spent on all this stuff, and I didn't even sleep that night. But there was a cure. Luckily, on each item there was a checkbox for next day delivery. So the following day, all these delivery guys are saying hello to other delivery guys as my stuff's coming in, printing paper, printer, all my software, signing for this, that, and the other. I'd forgotten what it had been like to be a kid at Christmas until that day. Everything fresh in box, not second hand, everything was mine to make my business work. And it was absolutely amazing. So with regards to Alison, I waited to see her for the first time properly until I was set up. Bought myself a couple of weeks, got my website up and running, make sure everything was plugged in and functioning, make sure all my software was fully up to date and operational. And I think to this day, at least every time I see her, the one question she'll have is, how are you? And that question, I always kind of respect that question now, because if they don't ask how you are, you can't let them know how you're feeling and how you're going. The reason being is because if they know you're not well, they know your business isn't well. So if you're struggling, your business will struggle. So if I don't have that question every time, I can't address my own issues. And after every meeting we have that how are you, and I can talk to her on any level, and I can bring up any issue I've got, and I'll walk out that meeting feeling much better and optimistic for my next day's work and the other projects that I've got going on. And it just brings to mind something that Michael said to me when I had my introduction with him. He says, we don't lead you to failure. In essence, we kind of walk you to success. And with what I've had from Michael, what I've had from Alison, that's been relative the whole time. So I do feel successful.
Without interrupting, at what stage did you get your first client?
My first client was probably after about a month. I did a fair bit of networking.
Yeah.
And you kind of feel like a small fish in a rather big pond.
Yeah.
Especially when you're networking at the same sort of events and they're all talking to each other, they're not acknowledging you.
Yeah.
You get a couple of minutes to make your introduction, but it's not always successful. I mean, look at me, I'm 30, but I don't even look at it. I feel sometimes physically it can be difficult for people to take me seriously. But I'm working on that. Just a couple of simple points. The first one is always be confident. Even if you're not physically, when you talk to someone and you're trying to sell them what you're doing, sound confident in what you're doing. If you're not making enough money, if you're struggling, don't let them know that.
No.
There are certain people you can tell about that, but you shouldn't be doing that in your elevator pitch or your meeting with a client, especially when they want to ask how soon do you want paid. Never address the issue in too much depth. Just say when you need that money. Don't overcomplicate, and when I say this, I'm on about your numbers. For me, it's an ongoing issue. But I've learned, especially under my mentoring, just keep it simple. Weigh it up with what goes out to what comes in. That's it. Just make sure you list every little bullet point and let your bank account do the rest of the work. Let it track it for you. And it makes your tax return a hell of a lot easier. Dare to be different. Some people say think outside the box. I prefer to pick it up and chuck it in the shredder. I'm a graphic designer, but I will dabble in photography, even at an amateur level. If I can supply my own imagery, it's something else I can charge for. Whatever other weapon you think you have in your arsenal, do try to use it. Whether you've got certificates and degrees in it or not, just try whatever you have because it can help your business. Keep it simple. Now, unlike the overcomplication, when I say keep it simple, I'm referring to your ideas. Have an idea, write it down, no matter how big and ludicrous it is, even if you want to be a millionaire by the end of the year. Write it down. If you've got this brainwave, have it on paper, because from there the relationship between head, pencil, paper does a lot of work for you. So just write it down, simplify it, and then take it out and see if it works. And you'll find that probably 9 times out of 10 it will work, compared to having an idea and just running with it while it's all up there. Have it on paper, because that's when you'll see the mistakes or the problems that might occur. It's the same with SWOT analysis. And most of all, have fun, not just in work, but outside of work. I always make sure I take, on average, 1 day a week out. Now, I'm a business person Monday to Friday, but then I have my children at the weekends. That's another job in itself.
Yeah.
So on a Thursday morning, I play football with our community who are showing off right here today. If I don't have that Thursday morning, I don't give my head a break, and then I don't get new ideas. I don't feel better about myself. So always allocate some time for yourself to do what you want to do. Don't let your job dictate you. You dictate your life. Where it's got me now, I mean, you've seen the t-shirt, we've got a stand out there. I'm in a cooperative of self-employed people known as the Jumpstart Initiative. We're all media-based. We work in film, photography, graphic design, illustration, sound and sound engineering, more recently marketing. We're able to merge these things to support new businesses. That's our niche. That's who we're looking to help. And community projects. If you keep thinking to yourself, there's a small fish in a rather big pond, there's no point going ahead. You should think, well, I don't want to be the small fish. I'm going to become a shark. I'm going to start circling around other people making things happen. And that's what we're trying to do with this, not just in business but in community as well. We feel we can fill both criteria with the projects we've got coming up. just before I end, I want to say thanks. And if it wasn't for the snow, which stopped this whole thing happening last time round, I wouldn't have revised that presentation. In addition to that, if I hadn't revised that presentation, I wouldn't have been thinking about myself at the moment. I've been doing it a lot lately. And in spite of the fact that I have been stable this year, over the last year, I want to go up one. And I've been looking at all the problems that I may not have seen before. It's the same as when you're writing things down. I wrote down what happened in my first year and what I could have changed. A couple of weeks ago, I had a meeting with two prospective clients of Jumpstart, and it was with an associate of mine called Gavin, who was in that video. And he was explaining to these two people who were both self-employed that just because you're self-employed doesn't mean you have to conform to the professional look that everyone else has. You can be entertaining with your brand and your identity because that is you. You sell who you are. And he hands over his business card to both of them, as well as the Jumpstart cards. And his own business within the collective is known as Purple Salmon. He's a web designer and his business is called Purple Salmon. And I couldn't correlate the relation, but then it got me thinking. Now, in his elevator pitch, he will walk up to a client and say, "Hi, my name's Gavin. I'm a web designer and SEO specialist. Here's my business, Purple Salmon." You hand over his card. Now, not only will you remember the name that he's a web designer, but what's going to stick in your mind a lot more is this quirky name, Purple Salmon, which is a reflection of his personality and of who he is. He's got a strange sense of humour. So why couldn't I do that for me? And going back to when I was 30, a present I got for my birth, I got two presents. One was to make me feel 30 years old, and the other was to make me feel 30 years young. And the 30 years old present was a pair of slippers. Admittedly, they were rather comfortable, I did like them. But then I got to open the 30 years young present, and this was from my daughter. And she got me a Lego set, which is based on the DC universe, which was Batman and the Joker. I had such a laugh building that. And since then, I've actually kept up with the collection. So me being a kid again, has brought out probably the life that I need outside of football, outside of work. I'm remembering my heritage, who I am. Even at school I was referred to as a bit of a dork. And I don't mind that now. I'm old enough to recognise, yeah, I'm a little bit geeky in some respects. But then I'm thinking, can I apply that to my business? Can there be a way for people to remember who I am without going, "Hi, my name's David, here's my business in design, I'm a graphic designer for print." I've said the same word over and over again. No one's going to remember that. If they lose my business card, they're not going to remember in design. They're just going to remember the word design. That's going to make their search a hell of a lot more difficult. You remember Purple Salmon. So it got me thinking. As a way of saying thanks, I'm going to share my new identity. In a couple of months' time, my current website, my URL is going to die, and I'm going to let it go. And I'm working on something else now. And after collaborating with the guys at Jumpstart, they've helped me form the beginnings, this premise of this identity. They're going to help me put my website together. I'm going to do all the rest of it, and they'll help me engineer that idea. So without further ado, I'm hoping this will go down well. I'm going to share my new look, okay?